How you doing, Ani? How are you feeling today?
I think I'm doing fine.
Glad to
You know?
hear it. So, your
Well,
intention today, you want to talk a little bit about um, no noises. No noises that we want to
yes.
avoid when
Yeah.
doing stuff. Cool. So, let's talk about this a little bit because I think that there's a lot of potential sounds that we might want to keep an ear out for as we're playing around with stuff. Um, we did a whole lesson on efficiency. So we don't want to, I don't want to duplicate that necessarily, but I will point out like places and ways that inefficient sounds will try to creep in. And I guess we might want to start by kind of just the overall general idea is that we want to avoid sounds that produce any kind of turbulence in the voice. So turbulence would be something like this. If I'm getting smaller and I go, hello, 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 hello,
It's
that
so
kind of
fast. 0 to constricted.
hello, 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 hello.
Ah,
One, two.
beautiful.
A little bit more subtle, I think, that time. But you can hear there's like that, like, muffly, hello, hello kind of sound quality. And that is a kind of turbulence in the sound. Let me eliminate that really quickly. Hello, 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 hello. And we can hear that really goes away very, very obviously. I'll reintroduce it slowly. Hello, 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 hello. And even at this like point where really it just sounds kind of muffled, it's already starting to sound like it's a little more turbulent. So, Ani, can you show me what that sounds like?
Oh, baby. Didn't study. Let's go. Hello, 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 hello. I forgot how to do constriction.
Oh no.
Jesus.
Oh, we've forgotten
Yeah,
constriction. What a great problem to have. It's okay. I
I
just
know.
wanted
Let
maybe
me let
to.
me warm up off the microphone real
Oh,
quick.
go hard.
Oh, do you want me to do it on mic? Okay.
No, no, no. Yeah, yeah, go hard.
Hello, 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 hello. There we go. Hello, 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 hello,
Nice.
hello, 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 hello. I have to force it so hard.
Yeah, and it definitely sounds like we're getting a lot of constriction there. And then suddenly, right, that little in between spot is quite difficult actually to achieve, I think. Just a little bit, a soupçon of constriction is a little tricky. But yeah, really great job. If we start with this like idea of listening for turbulence in the sound, um, one, two, three, one, two, three. Already, like, I think this is quite light, but there's already that kind of sound present. And so we want to start, especially when people are exploring weights. This is something that will manifest. People tend to feel like they have to like dampen the behavior of the folds rather than just getting lighter. So as we start to get
Oh, they try to get rid of the buzziness with more breath.
or get rid of the buzziness by introducing false fold constriction, right? If I go, that sounds a little buzzy and I don't like it. I want to get lighter. How can I do that? I'm going to start to clamp down instead. And you
Oh,
can hear that it starts to like, muffle. And then people will often find like a really like interesting sound with this kind of quality. And, um, yeah, it's not desirable. We want to learn to get softer and lighter without any kind of constriction. So you can hear that here. One, two, three, one, 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 two, three. That difference is what we're hoping to like start to clock. So that's one way that we can start to hear kind of turbulence in the sound. Um, these also, I think, are it's useful to start exploring these. I still think that there's room for unvoiced exploration. as a way to like kind of play with potential sounds. So,
Yeah.
as we start to
These
like,
can be very dangerous for
well,
the starter outers.
yeah, the thing is that if you're starting and you have no fucking clue what size is, I think it's usually better to explore size with a voice. Like 9 times out of 10. It's functional, it's really clear how to go into a usable sound. You know, if you go, A, 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 that's a way clearer like pathway towards speech than if I were to do the same thing, right? There's no necessarily like clear way from there forward. But you might have heard what I just did with that whisper, manifesting
Yeah.
some additional turbulence. So unvoiced practice can be really useful as a means of like exploring how we're getting from a large sound to a small sound and sort of what may be happening on the way. So let's see what that sounds like. If we go, I'll start large and I'll start kind of relaxed. The primary difference that we want to listen for here is the degree of airflow and the degree of turbulence in the airflow. So if I'm already starting with a whisper that feels like a stage whisper, hey, what's the answer to number 5? You know, that kind of sound, that's already a really high degree of turbulence, and we want as much as possible to avoid that. So we can hear that between that initial sound, and that end sound, it's like way less airflow and way less noise. And that is another kind of turbulence that we want to eliminate. That's going to be like that false fold constriction in the whisper. Whispers are inherently constricted on some level. So there's no way to avoid them completely or avoid false fold constriction completely while whispering. But our goal should be that as we whisper, we really closely monitor that it doesn't increase as we go. Increasing constriction is going to be audible as an increase in airflow, an increase in the sound of airflow. I mean, an increase in turbulence. So if I start, pardon me, if I start with like the letter A and go, and I now start to scale size, sometimes when people go larger, they will introduce some constriction, and that'll sound something like this. Can you hear that? Like,
The closing off.
yes.
How do you close off when you get larger? Like I get how to do it, but I don't know why people want to do
I
it.
think there's an element of like, I'm like trying to hear that really
Oh, they're
cavernous.
trying to do the glottal tap and they're just like
Yeah. Yeah. And they get just a little too much squeeze.
extreme. Yeah.
Things like that. Anything that
Yeah.
sounds
Squeaky
squeaky,
tire.
squeaky time. Velociraptor noises. Anything like that is going to be undesirable. So as we get larger, right? There's a feeling sometimes that people want to control the airflow. And I think when we get larger, to feel like you're controlling the airflow, you sort of feel like you have to introduce some degree of constriction. So like if I go, I feel like the air is like I'm like atrophying air and there's a lot of airflow. And in order to feel like I have control of the breath, sometimes people will feel like, okay, hold on, let me squeeze a little harder. And I think that that might be a point of origin for this as well. So,
Also can't hear it if you open up all the way.
because there's why literally nothing in interfering
Yeah.
with the airflow. It's
So that
just
might be why too.
right? So as we start to get smaller, people will often start to aim for that kind of sound where they hit like a kind of plateau, and instead of continuing to get smaller, they will introduce more airflow. I'm going to show you what this sounds like one more time. And you can hear I'm not getting much smaller as I go, but that like higher energy sound higher in the spectrum is more audible because I'm pushing more air through. Can you try that for us, Ani?
From low to small with like over
Yeah, just saying
pressurized at the
A,
end.
and then at the end start to overpressurize. Yeah. Good. And I think you plateaued and you started to hear there was like this little a couple times.
Yeah, I cleaned it up.
You
I
did.
was like, oh, spit.
But that is literally what can start to happen, right? We're pushing so much air through that. We're going to talk about the Bernoulli effect right now. What the F? So
No, don't, please, God.
the Bernoulli effect is something that happens in fluid dynamics where when you've got like a narrow aperture, when the pressure decreases, it draws the two sort of sides of that aperture closer together. And it's a fundamental part of how the voice functions. The vocal folds get brought together, and then the Bernoulli effect, the kind of change in air pressure that occurs at that narrowed aperture of the glottis, finishes the job, and that low pressure causes the vocal folds to snap closer together, then they get blown apart, then they snap closer together, and they do that a bunch of
So
times.
violent.
Snap maybe is not the right. They gently come closer together, and then they are forced apart by air. But what ends up happening is if we increase the airflow too much, when we've got like a really small size, like my tongue is pretty close to the roof of my mouth. And if I start introducing too much airflow, that increase in airflow decreases the pressure between my tongue and the roof of my mouth, and it's going to draw my tongue and my roof of my mouth closer together and start to introduce other kinds of turbulence. So this is also going to play a role in the production of like constricted sounds as well. That increased airflow will draw the false folds together. So if we're going we often start to get sounds like that as well. So let's start to listen to what this sounds like and a couple other little places we might get some turbulence. I'll do a couple demonstrations of size change. So if we can hear that distortion that's creeping in, sounds a little bit like false fold constriction, right?
Yeah.
But it's a sound that's created because the airflow is passing between my tongue and the back wall of my throat, or the tongue and the uvula, the tongue and the roof of the mouth. So those kinds of sounds, like that kind of stuff, is typically a sign that we're going to be getting, when we voice that, it's going to be a kind of knodely kind of sound. Yeah. So let's talk for a moment about that. So tongue root retraction is sort of the physiological thing that is happening when the root of the tongue starts to pull backwards. So it is exactly what it says on the tin. And the sound quality that we use to describe this is called knodel. And to my ear, knodel is like a Swedish word, I think, that originally refers to a potato dumpling. And
it's like, it sounds like a candy kind of.
It sounds like some kind of weird food stuff. And to my ear, what it kind of evokes is like that feeling of you've just put a piece of food in your mouth, but it's too hot, and you start to like, like I'm
That's a
trying to,
great analogy.
right? That feeling when you're trying to like blow air on this super hot food in your mouth without spitting the food out because you're not a barbarian and a savage because your mom raised you with manners. So,
So you look even dumber just sitting there like,
absolutely. That feeling of like having a full mouth and trying to talk past it, or like trying to blow past it a little bit. That kind of sound, knodel, is present in a lot of really fun voices to do. So when we say, like the purpose of today's lesson is really to discuss these sounds that we need to avoid as much as possible. Um, we don't mean avoid them all the time. We mean avoid them in masculinization and feminization. If you want to sound like Kermit the Frog as like a joke, or like to do the character voice, you should be able to do a kind of Kermity kind of sound at any time, if you really want to. But fundamentally, I don't want you to start introducing that ha sound when you're trying to feminize, because this is going to undermine the typicality of your voice. I will say there are cis women who exhibit this sound quality, but their voices sound atypical. There are cis men who exhibit this sound quality, but
my coworker.
their voices sound a little funny, right? They may even get teased. I think of people like Jordan Peterson, right? Jordan Peterson has like a very typical kind of masculine, weight and size. Maybe he's a little bit under full, but something that his voice does feature is this little bit of knodel quality kind of creeping into his sound uh, while he's lecturing. So you can hear that kind of sound quality, and then people will make fun of you for it. So
Yeah,
we don't
in
want
his
that.
case, rightfully so.
In his case, rightfully so. No bullying, unless you're a right wing political pundit. So we want to start to explore how to sort of listen for this sound, ways that we can start to monitor for it. So again, if we listen to a whisper and we hear, I'll show you on like an ah, that should be pretty clean sounding. But now, can you hear how it almost has like a like coughing up a hairball kind of sound?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the vibe. It's almost like a dry choking.
Dry choking as opposed to a wet choking.
No, like gagging, like
Interesting.
that's kind of
How did you,
it's a silent version of that.
I guess to my ear, that second sound maybe was false fold constricted. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. So
But it's
more,
like I don't know, it's the precursor to it where you're just like and then you start gagging.
uh-huh. That feeling,
I don't know. I've done this a lot.
that,
Picking up cat turds.
oh God, yeah, because you're like, I don't want to think about that. When we start getting that tongue motion backwards, to me, the sound is also similar to like sort of a trip to the dentist. If we start to hear sounds that sound like, I don't know, it sounds like to me like the little spit vacuum that they'll use. If you start to hear like those kinds of
Great
sounds,
analogy.
yeah, I think that those are going to be indicative of this kind of knurtle. So let's see what happens. We're going to go back to the like ah sound, and then just introduce a little bit of this, clearing uh, cat hair out of the back of your throat or whatever. Ani, try that for me. Mm-hmm. linguistically, what's happening here is that this point of occlusion, basically your tongue is getting really close to the roof of your mouth or the back wall of your throat, depending on where this is occurring. And it is kind of shaping the sound. The sound is kind of getting carved out. So we're losing a lot of mid-range frequencies. So when we do this kind of knurdly kind of sound quality, we get a lot of the fundamental and a lot of the super high frequencies, but most of the mids get dampened. So we get a kind of bizarre sound. And I think it's interesting and it's cartoonish, and in that sense, it's like fun to play around with. But we want to just make sure that we are not trying to do that when feminizing, because it's not the desired goal by a long stretch.
Not the vibe.
Not the vibe. So if we start with, let's try, we'll go, and then we'll do the same thing voiced. Ah, 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 ah. Can you hear that ah is still present even when I add voice?
Yeah.
It may just be a little bit masked by the voicing. Ah, 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 ah. So I'm getting loud enough
The,
there and energized
the first
there.
one was a great example.
What was that?
The first one was a great example.
But I'm trying to
Yeah.
remove some of the turbulence so it's a little bit more subtle. But we can still hear, right? Ah, 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 ah. That's all there. But we can also less audible turbulence, but still a lot of that kind of knurdly sound present. Now, as we start to explore this, there are like, again, if you want to do like a meatwad kind of voice, oh meatwad, you don't like that kind of sound or whatever, it's a valuable thing to explore. And if you bump into it while you're practicing, I think it's not like the end of the world, but it is pretty much impossible to feminize this to a typical degree if you're starting from that. And there is a lot of so there are just a lot of different resources in the trans voice space where this kind of sound is intentionally targeted. I'm thinking specifically of like L's Guide. I know for a while,
VTuber guides.
yes. And like
Jesus Christ.
even teachers that I've like known and talked to and worked with will often say things like, oh yeah, in order to feminize, you need to achieve that kind of stitch like sound quality. And
Why? What's the play there?
what's the logic of it?
Yeah, what's the logic? What's the goal?
So it's a misplayed, I don't know. So if I go I'm getting smaller. But, in the dark ages when we didn't know size, one of the things that we were trying to do was like, okay, how do we encourage pharyngeal constriction and pharyngeal narrowing? And people conflated this motion with the size change involved in pharyngeal constriction. So they heard this and they were like, oh, it's basically, right? And I am also guilty of this. I definitely worked with one or two students and was like, okay, if we start here and you go like, yeah, 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 and work towards a more neutral sound, can we play around with that? The reality is that if once you've made the connection that this action gets you smaller, you're fucked. It's so hard to undo that and to retrain your brain away from that action, because it's your tongue, and your tongue is like one of the strongest muscles in your body, and it really likes to participate. And once it's participating, she don't want to go anywhere. And it's so prevalent in the sound that once you've trained it in, it's like it's virtually impossible to get it out of the sound. So now I have like other tech that I focus on. I try to stabilize the tongue and move it forward actually, but like at the time I think people were saying things like lift your tongue backwards to take up space. And I don't think that's the play. I think pulling your tongue backwards potentially runs into too many structures and leads to us sounding fairly atypical. So, not desirable long term. So, if we do this kind of scale to see what this sounds like, first in isolation one more time, and then in a couple of different vowel sounds scaled. So, let's start with like ah. If I go ah, we can hear it's still ah like ah, ah, ah. But that kind of pulled back tongue sound is present. That's not something we want. Ani, can you try that?
Oh.
Good. Now let's start there and release. Ah.
Oh.
Very good. Your
That
initial
okay.
sound when you were doing the approach to getting more uh, tongue root issue stuff sounded like it started with a little bit of knodel to begin with to my ear. Now,
Yeah. I thought we were supposed to start with
now I
knodel.
wanted to start clean and then add it.
Oh,
No worries.
damn it.
No worries. But then you released it when you released it, so that's all that matters. Um, I will say there are people that are like, oh yeah, use stitch voice to find fem voice. I think that's a big kind
Okay,
of
okay.
no doing that. There are people that will say like, oh yeah, tongue root retraction helps with adduction of the folds. Um, this is something that I've heard from a lot of Estel people. Um, I think that it is not worth the potential benefit to vocal fold closure to internalize this shit. And it is better to target vocal fold closure if you need additional closure. And especially with closure stuff, that's when I hear it kind of um, targeted for masculine voices. And I think that is also not the play. If you're trying to masculinize your sound and you're like, oh yeah, like definitely getting a little bit more of that kind of sound. And I don't think this sounds
Oh,
more
oh.
masculine than if I just released it and just stayed heavy and achieved a higher degree of closure. And by
It all
internalizing
sounds
that,
weird.
I'm now like limiting my tongue's posture and I'm changing my pronunciation in a lot of different ways that I probably don't benefit from long term either. And the voice sounds a little bit bizarre. Sounds a little atypical. And
Sounds a little underfullish.
a little under full. Almost I'm like really and then do you hear how
Yeah,
buzzy it gets? Also, that's kind
yeah.
of the trap of
It's uncontrolled.
Knurtle narrows the vocal tract really hard at one point and then expands the vocal tract in relation. So if you get buzzy enough to fill out the sound, if you get enough weight to fill out the sound, there's going to be a super over full kind of sounding, twangy sounding edge to it all of the time. There's no way to balance it because it's wide open at one point and super narrow at another, and that is not what we want. And so,
Side tangent.
yeah.
Uh, the Estel, is that like the premium vocal coaching SLP club? Is that who they
Mm,
are?
I think it is a new fad among SLPs to think that they know what the fuck they're doing because they took an Estel course. Estel is, I think it's Estel Vocal Method or Estel Vocal. Yeah, I think Estel Vocal Method is the name of the organization, and it's a fairly useful sort of skill building focused vocal method. And they have like kind of I guess I'll say a couple of things about what my reservations are. One, the focus is super on physiology. So they when they talk about twang, they're talking about like aryepiglottic full sphincter narrowing, and they really are like, you need to feel it here. You need to do this physiologically. And it's like, okay, that a those descriptions are of what's happening are incomplete and wrong, and also that's not the best way to teach people how to make sounds. So from that angle, I think it's already kind of flawed pedagogically. But also, professionally and in terms of the overall structure, it is a little bit like a multi-level marketing scheme a little bit. You start as a student, you take some classes, they certify you to also teach your own Estel classes. You build your own, you know, client base of students, but you can only teach them certain levels of content. And if they want to go further, then either you need to get the next level of certification and become a certified master teacher. And when, and again, there are like different tiers to all of
Jesus
this. So it's
fucking.
just,
All right, move on,
yeah,
move on.
yeah, yeah. It's just a kind of a scheme, in my opinion. And yeah, it and CVT, which is complete vocal technique, I think, are two sort of like codified models that I think are fairly popular on the internet in terms of vocal spaces. So if you ever go to the shadow realm that is r/singing, you'll see a lot of people utilizing terminology from Estel and from CVT. And I honestly think that in so
Yeah,
many
but
ways,
can
it
they do girl voice?
no,
Can any of those motherfuckers do girl voice?
no, I don't think that is something that they instruct on.
Damn, sucks for them.
I think
Really missing out here.
theoretically you can use Estel stuff and cobble together, and this is what SLPs are mostly, I think, using it for. Is like, you know, not to tangent too hard, but the problem with SLPs is that most of them don't have any background in voice and don't use the voice themselves. So they don't know how to fundamentally change any of these vocal features. So they can't describe what they're doing. And they probably need some exploration and training just in using the voice more consistently. But I think it is a bit of a trap to presume that, you know, 1 10-week course is going to leave you with enough knowledge to teach people how to meaningfully change their gender. To instruct people to do that anyway. So yeah, all of that shit talking aside, um, let's listen for some more knodel. I'm gonna do knodel on size change. Or no, let's start one more example. I'll do a couple of different vowel sounds and introduce some knodel. So I'll do an E sound. If I go E, the space in the back of my throat is really wide open. So what you're going to hear as I start to do this is it's going to sound a little bit different than when I started with the ah. If I go ah, oh, the back of my tongue is low and flat in my mouth, and I'm able to get a point of contact that is lower in my throat. Less true with E. I'm actually going to grab a little image here because I think it's useful. Give this a look. See, on the left hand side of this image, you'll see the tongue in the E posture. E as in B, C, etc. And on the right hand side, it's an all sound. And I want you to take a look. Our little friend's hiding in that. Looks like a kind of like Oogie Boogie. He's so cute, actually. If you just take him, you know, he's trying so hard. So this image actually shows what some knodel sounds like or looks like visually. Can you see how in the right hand side of this image, the tongue's posture is low and back to the point that it's actually making a point of contact with the uvula?
Yeah.
That sound, this is actually pretty typical of like operatic singing, and I think that these tend to be where we get these MRIs from. It's always like, oh, we got some opera singer to come in and do some shit. And
In the machine.
in the machine,
Jesus.
the opera singer in the machine. And what you can see is that point of contact. I'll demonstrate E and aw, neutral. So we get a true aw, but it won't be knurdly. And then I'm going to do what's visualized in this image so we can see what that last point of contact actually does to a motherfucker. So if I start with E oh, you can hear, sorry for the clipping actually. E that sounds like I could say like saw or maw or whatever. Sounds like an AW to me. But if I start to take that tongue a little further back and get a little bit more of that knurdle sound, here's what it sounds like. E oh. Can you hear how now it has that little bit of distorted quality to it?
Yeah.
It's like the sound is getting stuck and trapped back there by some kind of structure. So that's what's happening in the right-hand side of this image. It's not a true awe, it's awe with this weird point of contact happening. So if we see, right, the tongue is lower, it's able to point to kind of touch lower in the back of the throat. And we can actually get the tongue to touch even lower than is depicted in that image. But if we start with E, can you hear that sounds a little bit different?
Yeah.
It's
way different.
It still sounds like the same thing, right? It's got that kind of muffled, but then sort of like buzzy combination sound quality. But it's really hard to do an E and have a point of contact that's really low.
Ooh.
That sound is really, really, really bizarre, right? That's a kind of cartoon. Yeah, Nasty Hobbits is 100%, 100% a kind of Gollumish. Yeah, stupid hobbits. That's all that distortion. It sounds like false fold constriction, and maybe Andy Serkis was doing some false fold constriction too. It's been so long since I've seen Lord of the Rings that I should.
A lot of these character voices seem to incorporate some level of false fold constriction. SpongeBob, yes. Patrick, they all have it.
But I think it's worth noting that I think the most damaging sounding stuff in Gollum's voice is not actually false fold constriction. It's my tongue being close to the roof of my mouth and producing that horrible, almost like it sounds like I'm fucking my throat up, but it's not. Yeah. It's like not even touching my vocal folds. It's just my tongue going and making those horrible sounds. So yeah, we can hear the manifestation. Yeah, it's like Gollum and Daffy Duck had some kind of horrible hybrid child. Right? So, as we start playing around with these scales, monitor to make sure if you're going E, 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 this is pretty small, but I don't hear yet any sign of like the tongue pulling back. E, I'm getting, I think, pretty small, right? If I start to get this is not going to be a desirable sound quality that we're looking for because it sounds bad. It sounds atypical. If your goal is to sound like a cartoon character, success. You've done it. But this is not going to be this sort of like typical passing sound that we want to find. Does that all make sense?
Yeah.
Can you show me what that maybe? E sounds like when you do it?
Oh, fucking.
Yeah. And there I actually think you did a good job of finding a kind of like subtle in between kind of sound. Like I don't think it was super. You started with it more and then you released it fully and then you kind of wound up kind of in the middle again. And it was, it almost sounded like, yeah, like durable. No. What I hear a lot of is girls who have, especially girls who have like aimed to get smaller but feel like they can't get small enough, so they're like plateauing. This especially happens if we're a like a larynx height kind of focused person. We want to
Oh,
not
baby.
just sidebar, don't fucking think about your larynx. But when people are doing they're like ha 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 and they feel like they're stuck, sometimes they'll go ha 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 ha, and they hear that sound change and they go, okay, cool, I must be going in the right direction. But this is a separate direction that is leading us astray and taking us
It's a
to hell.
motherfucking
It's a
trap.
trap, right? So as we go through this, really make sure. Oh, I'm like, literally that time I was intentionally keeping my tongue as far out of my mouth as I could so that it doesn't accidentally pull backwards. That's something that I find really useful when exploring this. You can either just
Oh,
start,
Brittany tongue.
huh? Brittany tongue.
Brittany
Oh, we're gonna talk
tongue.
about L's and R's here in a hot second. So if I do and start neutral, start with like a whatever. I'll start larger, right?
Oh,
And then stick my tongue out. Ah, that change that's happening is one of the components of size change. The back of your tongue rising and moving forward. It's not refined, but I'm already kind of getting the beginnings of that motion. But as you did that, Ani, try that one more time. Can you hear how the back of your tongue is trying to bump up against some shit?
Yeah.
Yeah. So think that the root and back are shifting really far forward. Uh-huh. And now you're already getting smaller, so you're cheating, but that's good. And now you might
I
also want
thought
to
that was the
start.
goal.
You're getting,
I
but you're
don't
not.
understand.
You're doing great. You're not doing anything wrong. It was you turned on extra size change too, which was
Oh,
I was saying
hit.
getting smaller. But you did more than just the like tongue out size change. You started just actually flexing and going for girl sounds. So see if you can just move the tongue. But
Oh.
uh-huh, yeah.
That.
Okay, did you hear?
I found all around now.
Uh-huh, uh-huh. And sometimes, and this is a fucking trap, sometimes even with your tongue out of your mouth, the back of your tongue can still be touching something, or the back walls of your throat will collapse and touch against some structure too much and get a little ha 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 ah. So even though it feels like I'm sticking my tongue out super far, I'm still getting that kind of sound quality. So it's a tricky situation. Something that I think is useful is to start with your tongue out and aim for a large sound. Can you start with that? Yeah.
Uh.
And does that sound like it has any knodel to it?
Uh.
Let's use an A. Same thing. A, A. And now as you get smaller, A, 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 A. I'm just gonna just take a little clip of that one because I want you to listen to it later, maybe, potentially, on at some point. Yeah. So then you just get a nice size change, and hopefully, if you listen and you go, I just thought to hear that happen, then you can like, like dodge the ha 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 component of that sound. Um, So let's talk about consonant sounds that want to introduce this. Um, R and L are sort of approximations of the tongue to the roof of the mouth in different positions. So, depending on where you're making that approximation, bringing the tongue closer to the roof of the mouth, you'll hear an L sound or you'll hear an R sound. And there are a couple of different spots along the vocal tract that you can accomplish this. What ends up kind of happening is that there are different pronunciations of R and L. And for example, some of them have phonemic importance. Not typically in English, but there are several Slavic languages where the difference between L and L is important. And we hear the sort of knurdly L sound as a part of a feature of the language, right? In English, people sometimes do fall into this trap and will say things like, "Oh yeah, all my friends go there. All my friends." Can you hear how that all is formed?
Oh, oh,
All is formed really
oh.
far back in the throat. And because of that, it's that point of the tongue touching up against some structure becomes a higher risk. And if we were to, at this larger size, do that, all my friends go there. I don't think that sounds too knurdly. All my friends. But if I get smaller, and then I try to pronounce the same L and go, all my friends go there. All. The same action in the smaller space results in the tongue touching a structure in the back of the throat and producing a sound. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like you got used to living in one kind of circumstance, a certain size room, and then it's like someone came in the night and swapped your bedroom and just like shrank it down. You're gonna stub your toe against random
Ah,
shit,
they
right?
they Tom Nooked my
They
place.
Tom Nooked you, and it means that your old range of motion for L sounds, for example, but also for R sounds, your old range of motion can't be accommodated anymore. We need to find a new range of motion of the tongue. So something that I think is super beneficial here is to think of Queen Brittany. Just in any hour of need, I think it's appropriate to think of Brittany. But especially this particular way that she was coached to lip sync for videos, and you can see this is her saying an L, and her lip is or her tongue is touching her lip. Try this. Go la 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 with the tip of your tongue touching the lip.
La, 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 la,
La luck lucky lucky lucky.
la, la, lucky,
Now, this
lucky,
sounds
lucky.
uncoordinated and silly because it is. If you actually, I don't think anyone actually says like, "Oh my God, I love you," with the tip of the tongue on the lip, la. But it is an approach that
La,
if you
la,
are someone who is used to saying L a little further back, and you notice that as you're playing around with, you know, scaling words and scaling sentences, if you get like all, and you feel like your L is having some issues and touching the back of your throat, try saying all with the tip of the tongue on your lips. Try that for me, Ani.
all.
I can hear you fighting this tendency, and you're so brave, and I love you so much. And if we see if we can try, right, we would start by aiming for the lip, and then you can let the tip of the tongue come back, and you can try the same gesture, but now on the sort of like just behind your teeth. All.
Fuck. All, all,
And that sounds like a more normal L. If we start going further back, all, that's when we start introducing that knodely quality. Yes. And then you can hear, oh, it also starts distorting size because once the back of your tongue is pulling backwards and lowering, you're gonna lower and expand all of that space and you're going to get a larger sound quality. So this is something that I've seen a lot when people get, you know, are trying to scale on L's and R's at all, or when they are trying to, they're going through she. I think this is pretty knurdle free, but if I go, she sells seashells by the seashore, you can
how the
hear
fuck do you
those sounds trying to creep in.
shell? How?
She's
Shell.
shell.
Like you have to pull
But
back.
some people do
Shell.
that. Some people say L back there. And so it's not pulling back for them. That's their normal L posture.
Oh,
And it only
that
becomes
sucks.
really manifest when you're super small. Shell. That just sounds like shell. It might sound a little bit weird because we're dissecting it now. Pretty shell. But if I get small, that shell starts to really interfere. So we want instead shell. And we have to make that adjustment.
Shell.
There are probably cis women who are pronouncing shell, and pulling it backwards. But they don't have to risk that a distortion of the vocal tract is going to cause them to suddenly get large, like this size, So for them, it's like, who cares? They're just a little bit bigger than average or a little bit bigger than their own, baseline. And it doesn't really impact the gender presentation of the voice. But for me, if I let my tongue distort the vocal tract when I'm in a feminine configuration and I go shell, that's sus. That's sus as fuck. So I have to just be mindful of it. R is the same thing. We can form an R. That's really far forward. Or we can do R, a more kind of piratical sounding R kind of sound. And people do this all the time. Oh, are you going there? Are you going to go to the store? And if you're large, right, large, I don't have to worry. Like, are you going to the store? Really far back, and it doesn't necessarily sound weird. It just sounds like maybe this is my accent. But if I try to do the same pronunciation, are you going to the store?
Are you going to the store?
Exactly.
Ugh.
So something that helps with this, I think, is to start with a large R, 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 and I feel like the point of approximation of the tongue to the roof of the mouth shifting forward in the mouth as I go through that. So I feel like I'm targeting not the back wall of my throat for this R. I'm targeting I'm trying to aim for the front of my mouth, like just behind the alveolar ridge. I'll use a little diagram here for people who want to follow along. Basically, I'll start small, and I'll start with an R, that's like 9, that's aiming for 0.9. R, 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 and that's like more 0.7, or like almost trying to trend towards 0.6. R, 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 R. But yeah, that little point of approximation is slightly different. So you want to not shift R backwards, but instead almost forward. R. The only shift that this makes sense to me is literally thinking about, if we're thinking of the perceptual quality, I think about it as a change in pronunciation. So you're starting with a kind of pirate R, and aiming for a more feminine sounding R sound. If you can produce an E that is small and not retroflex. So if you're not getting e, and you're succeeding at getting
Uh, uh.
e, try that.
The
No, the
retracted one
normal
or the normal one?
e.
E, E,
Good. And you just go ear, ear, ear.
ear, ear,
That's
ear,
going to help you find an that's a little bit more forward in the
er.
mouth. Ear, 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 rather
Oh,
than,
think of it as ER rather than just R.
yeah. But then you can then say ear, rear, 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 and try to just start with that same R posture. And that can also be useful. Cool. So L's, R's, vowel sounds with knodel. I don't think I missed anything knodel related. Did we touch base on everything? I think so. Any questions?
Maybe nasality.
Hmm.
Nasality is like the only thing we missed, but that it's like 3 minutes till.
No, because I've got a half hour after you free. So, let's do a quick nasality. GG. So nasality is a sound quality that we get when so to use this little diagram that we can see here, when the soft palate is lowered or in any way unseals from the back wall of the throat. When the soft palate is sealed, we get all of the sound starting at the glottis and vocal folds, traveling up the back of the throat, and then it goes out past your lips and out of your mouth. But if the soft palate lowers, we get a more nasal quality. So the soft palate can be fully sealed against the back wall of your throat and fully sealed against the tongue. If it's fully sealed against your tongue, as in the letter, the sound in NG, like sing or song, if you go to an
Sing.
all of the sound is going to be going out of your nose. Mm, mm. And as we open, that sound is going to go out of your mouth instead. Now, like most things in life, this is not a strict binary where it's either fully sealed shut or fully sealed open. It's often some range of positions in between. So it's our job to sort of monitor for this, and there are a couple of different ways we can do that. My first thing I'm going to say is nasal consonants in the English language are M, N, and the NG sound in sing or song. In addition, there are a couple other exceptional sounds in borrowed words, such as onion, jalapeno, and lasagna, where you get that nya, nya, nya kind of sound.
Yeah.
Or cat girl, you're right, you're right. So that's cat girl erasure on my part, and I apologize. I will accept any form of cancellation. So that nya is also another opportunity for nasality to arise. Those sounds have to be nasal. If they are not appropriately nasal, the voice will sound hyponasal. It will sound like it's not quite nasal enough, and M's will kind of sound kind of B-like, N's will sound kind of D-like, and yeah, it'll give a kind of like stuffy nose kind of quality. Like if I say like, Bub, Bub, I need to go to the store. Bub, Bub, can you get me some chicken soup? It sounds like I'm saying mom with a really stuffy nose, but it's just a B. Bub, Bub, Bub. That kind of hyponasal sound is that lack of sufficient nasal.
Yeah.
Same thing happens on like send me that. Can you send me that file? Said, and I'm getting kind of like a stuck or trapped nasality to the sound. So all of that said, in those cases we need full nasality, but outside of those cases, nasality is less important. Or wait, the opposite. Wait, we want to monitor to make sure that nasality is not included in the sound where it's not appropriate. So, that said, there are languages where nasality and partial degrees of nasalization are phonemically important. In English, if I turn on a ton of nasality and I go like, "Oh, Mr. Sheffield, oh my God, what are you doing? This is very nasal, but you can understand all of what I'm saying." It's not like changing the fundamental meaning of my speech. It's just like slightly nasal and, well, exceedingly nasal and also very that. So in French, for example, if I say beau, 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 which means beautiful, beau, beau, and I say bon, 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 which means like good, those words are different because of the nasality. So if you're accidentally nasalizing when you shouldn't be in some languages, you're going to alter the meaning of your speech, and that is less desirable. So it becomes something that's even more integral to like monitor in languages where nasality features strongly, and nasalization of vowels occurs. So, all of that said, here are some good ways to approach exploration of nasality. I like to use a kind of Santa Claus laugh to start with. This is going to start large and just kind of light, and you're going to go, ho, ho, ho. Can you do that, Ani?
Ho, ho, ho.
In most people's voices, I would say this really large ho, ho, ho is not going to be very nasal. Sorry, I needed water. So we're going to do ho, ho, ho one more time.
Ho, ho, ho.
And now we're going to go and do a really bad impression. I apologize to any Francophone people in chat. We're going to do like a really bad impression of like a French chef. And I want you to go, ho, ho, ho.
Ha, ha, ha.
Yeah. Now alternate ho, 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 and ho, ho, ho.
So I imagine a French chef has nasal though. Like ha ha ha. Oh wait.
Yeah.
Ha ha
That's
ha.
exactly what we're doing. We're turning nasality
Oh, okay.
off. Ho, 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 ho.
Ho ho ho. Ha ha ha.
Exactly. And if you can already start to perceive the difference in the sound there, that's one kind of extreme way to start to play around with this nasality. Another would be to say, okay, well, what if we take a word like, let's say, log, and you're going to say log, 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 log. Try that.
Clean.
Yeah, well, just say log.
Log 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 log
And
log
again,
log log.
CHYs, it's okay, right? We're gonna intentionally fuck this up. Now we're gonna make it long, 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 long.
Long 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 long.
Hear that kind of murmuring sound, that slight dark hum that
Yeah,
covers
yeah,
the sound.
yeah,
That
yeah.
is nasality. And now we're going to alternate log, long, log, long, log, long, log, long, and really differentiate between those two sounds.
Log long log long log long log long log long.
Good. So that's going
Try
to be
not to trip.
intentionally sort of inserting nasality where we expect it to be, and then kind of sort of like contrasting it with a sound that isn't super nasal. And because of the NG and G kind of forming in the same spot in your throat, you'll be able to start feeling the interaction of the soft palate and the tongue that starts to produce that nasalization. So then you might decide, okay, cool, I can start to feel these general sounds. What can I do from there? I really like to try things like this. I want to scale, and I like to take paired words like steep and steam. And these are the same except one ends with a nasal and one doesn't. And I'm going to go steep, 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 steep. And I'm going to see if I can get really small. But what sometimes happens is that people, as they get smaller, will sometimes get a little bit more nasal. Steep, steep,
Ooh.
steep, steep.
And what you can hear is that E starts to get some nasalization. Well, if I alternate between steep, steam, steep, steam, steep, steam, and really try to make the steep and the steam feel different, that's one way that I can approach this. In general, um, I don't have a preference in terms of order, so I also like to try steam, 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 steep, steam, steep, steam, steep, and see if I can differentiate between the more nasal and less nasal versions. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Try that for me. Start with steam.
Steam, 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 steep, steam. Do you want me to add nasal?
Yeah, try nasalizing it over much.
Steep, steam, steep, steam, steep, steam.
Can you hear that Ani's steep is like
Steam, steep.
consistently perfect, but her steam on that second one started getting a little a little nasal on the E sound? That's what we're looking for. We want to differentiate them, right? So if you start to get a little too nasal on steam, that's totally fine. Here's an approach that can be useful if you find that you're accidentally getting over nasal on words like steam and the E is nasalizing a little bit too much. I like to think I'm going to trick myself. I'm going to start by scaling steep. Steep, 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 steep. I'm getting quite small here. And then I'm going to start saying steep, 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 keeping the nasality out on that extended E. And then I'm going to like fake myself out and go steam, 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 and introduce the M at the very end and see if I can hold on to the non-nasal steam for as long as I can. Can you try that for me, Ani?
Steep, steep. Ooh, that was a bad. Steep, 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 steam, steam.
Good. How did that feel? Can you hear how the ends at like transitions from the E to the M at the very end? Can we try doing it
steam.
badly once where you go
Steam and let the steam get nasal?
Steam. Steam.
Yeah.
Steam. Steam. It's like there's not a big difference between the E and the M because the E is already nasalized. Steam. And now let's go back to our friend. Steep. Steep.
So scale st and then just say p.
Yeah.
Steep, 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 steep.
And now steam, steep, steam, steep.
Steam, steep, steam, steep.
Good. To my ear, I can literally hear eem, 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 and the M comes on at the very end, and that's exactly what we're looking for. We want the M to not too badly influence the consonants and vowels around it. So if you're feeling like some of these vowels are getting a little bit too nasal, that's something that you're going to want to look into is like really differentiating between a vowel that's just totally oral and a vowel that starts to become nasal. All right, cool. So that's knodel, that's nasality. Anything else that we want to touch on today?
Nyan. I just wanted to say that.
Nyan. Cool.
Nyan. Per lessons when?
Never, you degenerate. How dare you? Friends, thank you for listening. Yeah.
Can you point me to a resource that goes into how to become small?
Absolutely.
Yes, in voice resources, there is a size, a weight, and a size weight. And then there's a whole ass lesson on just size.
And all of that is available in voice resources. And yeah, if you would like, thank you, Ani. That's what I was about to do. So, friends, that's all for me for right now. I've got another public lesson starting in about 45 minutes. But for now, I'm gonna run. Let me dismiss the robot and send this. This lesson